Hello everybody, I'm Mango Thunderslice, and today we are continuing with how the Redheads built the pyramids, exploring some of the hidden history about the megalithic race known as the Arya, who inhabited Ireland and influenced cultures not just in the West but all over the world. So continuing on today with chapter 5 of Michael TSARION's book, The Irish Origins of Civilization. This one is entitled The Aryans, right? Sure to set off some people, some SJWs when they read this. All right, here we go. Quote, "It is stated on a parchment found in a brick wall in the foundations of Dendera at the time of King Pepi. The Great Pyramid was built by the followers of Horus. The stellar cult people were the followers of Horus in the same sense as the Christians were the followers of Christ. The architect who drew the plans was Nu-Er-Nub Ari, the keeper of the secrets." End quote, Albert Churchward, The Origins and Evolution of Religion. The word Ireland comes from Ari or Arya land, meaning land of the Arya or Aryans. In Indo-European languages, the term Alien meant Lord or God. The letter A was transposed to E, and so we have Eri, Aire, Hirain, and Erin. The ancient Irish, being inherently romantic and spiritual, believed their land to be a living goddess. They referred to her as Ari or Eri. The ancient Irish, being inherently romantic and spiritual, believed their land to be a living goddess. They referred to her as Ari or Eri. In various myths where the goddess and others appear and speak, they do so as personifications of the land. This mythological idiosyncrasy did not originate with the Greeks and their Demeter or with the Hindus and their Prakriti. It came from Ireland, the land of Horus, Inis na Fidba. To be specific, in Irish mythology the land did not bear the name of one goddess but three. Ireland was named after Eri and two related goddesses named Fodla and Banba. This convention of three tutelary gods, goddesses, or chieftains was emulated by the Egyptians, whose nomes or sacred cities along the Nile were always dedicated to a triplicity of gods. Again, it was from Ireland that the idiom originated. We plainly see that from Irain or Erin comes Aryan. An Aryan was a man under the goddess, a keeper of her mysteries. This distinction must be borne in mind at all times if the genuine species is to be distinguished from the genuine fake. Eri or Ari referred to the land of Ireland, and Arya or Aryan to a man of the land, that is, to an elder initiated into the mysteries of earth and sky. As an elder, he and his confederates had a most important job to attend to, namely, the healing of the earth. They were caretakers of an earth that had been torn, rent, and ravaged. As doctors and surgeons attend the casualty of an automobile wreck, so the men who came to be known as the Druids attempted to heal Earth's grievous wounds. They did not regard catastrophes as we do today in our spiritless times. To them there was no such thing as a random act of fate or nature. Everything that occurred had meaning. All that happened in the natural world did so to instruct and guide. The lessons of nature, the ultimate teacher, were to be heeded and cherished. It was never a case of bad and good, for these were not unsophisticated men drunk with superstition, as we have been led to believe by wretches whose minds are truly rank and foul. The Arya, elders, magi, or druids were purified men eligible to work with the subtle energies of the earth. Few were pure enough for such science. Only those hygienic in mind and heart dare attend to duties of this kind. The Druidic order of Aryan elders reverenced the earth and commissioned the construction of the many Mesolithic and megalithic sites covering Britain, France, and Scandinavia. They were the Magi who instructed the world's hierophants how to undo what had been done and how to again set upright the pillar. Quote, "In ancient times there lived a noble race of men called the Aryans, speaking a language not yet Sanskrit, Greek, or German, but containing the dialects of all. This clan, which had advanced to a state of agricultural civilization, had recognized the bonds of blood and sanctioned the bonds of marriage. That they worshipped nature, the sun, moon, sky, and earth. Their chief object of adoration was the sun." End quote, Sarah Elizabeth Titcomb, Aryan Sun Myths, 1899. Quote, theirs were hands free from violence, theirs were the mouths free from calumny, theirs the learning without pride, and theirs the love without venery. End quote. Ancient poem on the Druids. Quote, on earth exist the worlds of nature, the informal life of waters, trees, insects, animals, and two classes of men. One class is the ordinary man, naked, inert, always menaced by death's darts. The other class is the superior man, in the shade of the altar. The Magi spines of penance become for him the wings of the soul, and in his hands he harmonizes the four states of matter. He has achieved consciousness. He has achieved the power of truth and can act. He is. End quote from the Mayan Codex Matzahuatla, or Pyramid of Fire, circa 1500 AD. Quote, man lived in an animated spiritual world, saturated with meaning, imbued with moral purpose. The nature of this purpose was revealed in the stories people told each other about the structure of the cosmos and the place of man. But now we think empirically, at least we think we think empirically, and the spirits that once inhabited the universe have vanished. End quote. Jordan Peterson, Maps of Meaning. The names Eri and Ari correspond closely and suggestively to a name once used for the land of Egypt, Eri. In Egyptian, the syllable ar or Ari connotes the eye. Eri was also akin to Patira, name of the capital of the Hittites of Cappadocia in Turkey. The word Patira refers to Ireland and its inhabitants, to whom Hittites, Hurrians, Phoenicians, Sumerians, Luvians, Amorites, Syrians, and Minoans were related. The capital city of the Phoenicians in Palestine was known as Tyre, meaning place of Eri, Ari, or Aryans. I find little essential difference between this place name and that of Tara, the capital of the ancient kings and druids of Ireland. We might ask if it is a coincidence that so many place names in Eastern Europe, Asia Minor, Egypt, Africa, and the Levant contain Gaelic roots. For instance, Sumeria, some Arya, Tura, Sudan, Dan from Danu, Jordan, Sharadana, ancient name for Sardinia, Syria, Iran, Argos, meaning Greece, Naharana, also known as Mesopotamia, Arvad, also known as the Phoenician island, Thar, ancient name for Tanis, Saqqara, and Sahara, Arya, contain distinct Irish roots. Another permutation of Ari is found in Sanskrit as Ari, which referred to Persia and the tribe of that name living there. The term meant excellent, high, or honorable ones, the lords of the earth. The phoneme R that appears in the word arable from arare referred to those expert in the cultivation of the soil. The Irish were renowned for their skill with building, plowing, husbandry, and farming. Their religious attention to celestial events such as the cycles of the sun and the moon served them practically. For the Druids, what was above was also below. From the syllable Ari comes Iran, the later name of Persia. The name Horus, originally rendered Heru, Har, or Hari, like the name Harris, meaning hawk, is a variant of the root and term Ari. In the Bible, the Aryans are referred to as Persians, Hittites, Phoenicians, Canaanites, Philistines, and perhaps even as Amorites, the race that markedly influenced the Babylonian civilization. Most of these cultures employed the symbol of the hawk or eagle. The capital of the Hittites in Cappadocia was known as Eagle City, or City of the Eagle. And Hierakonpolis, one of the most ancient cities of Upper Egypt, was known as City of the Hawk, or more probably City of the Hawks. Quote, Ramses III defeated a motley army of allied tribes from the Near East. He then memorialized the event by placing other porcelain tiles at Medinet Habu. Among those were Syrian, Philistine, Hittite, and Amar or Amorite representation. The Philistine was represented with reddish skin, small pointed beard, and smooth upper lip. End quote. Letters from Mr. Bononi to Professor T. Hayter Lewis. The original official consensus deemed the Aryans to have first come into being as a race over 18,000 years ago in Africa. They were believed to be an offshoot of the so-called Hamitic ethnic group that, according to theologians, originated with Ham, the son of Noah. Even Egyptians and Canaanites, among other Asian and Mediterranean groups, were considered racially Hamitic, that is, descended from Ham, the son of Noah, believed to have been the progenitor of all African peoples. This consensus was finally proven to be unsustainable academic nonsense and was rejected as a symptom of the colonialist mindset that prejudiciously categorized certain races and tribes as inferior and recalcitrant. The preposterous travesty is clarified once it is understood that the term Hamitic originally referred to Egypt and its non-Semitic inhabitants. One of the earliest names for Egypt was Ham and also Cam. The Hamites were therefore Egyptians and not some indefinite Semitic group. One would have wished the scholars who eventually refuted the Hamitic myth would have also rectified the Aryan myth and discarded the racial denotation of this sorely misused term. The next theory to gain popularity during the early 20th century declared the Aryans to be tribes that originated near the Danube River Valley, Balkans, or region known as Cappadocia in modern Turkey. Zoologically, botanically, anthropologically, and linguistically, Turkey, ancient Anatolia, is considered a Western country. It was certainly one of the homelands, if not the original one, of Caucasian racial types. Professor L.A. Waddell referred to the inhabitants of Cappadocia as Goths. He established that these white-skinned Gothic tribes were ancestors of the Phoenicians and Sumerians. He explained the manner in which they colonized the Shinar Plains and established empires in Babylon and pre-dynastic Egypt. He also connected the Gothic race to the Minoans, Amorites, and Hittites. King lists found in the Indian Puranas, translated by Professor Waddell, confirmed that the white Aryan kings of Cappadocia were identical to the kings mentioned in the Egyptian and Babylonian records and king lists of northern India. While I do not contest in any way the majority of Professor Waddell's findings, I do not accept Aryan as a term distinguishing racial type. I prefer to employ the term to distinguish caste and creed. In short, the so-called Aryans were not a race at all, nor were they descended from an Asian ancestor. An Aryan was a member of any spiritually endowed sect or cult that had its origin in pre-Diluvian civilizations. Sadly, a lot of vexatious problems have arisen in the study of race and language simply because the world's academics have paid no mind to the existence of the great prehistoric civilizations mentioned in so many myths and legends. The term Aryan has been misapplied from the beginning. When one interpretation foundered, another one, just as preposterous, was invented. Despite the work of many erudite scholars, the problem of misinterpretation continues to the present day. Quote, the ancient inhabitants of Britain, the Gaelic and British Celts, have been already described as forming a branch of what are roughly called the Aryans. This name has, however, little reference to race and really signifies the speakers of a group of languages which can all be shown to be connected and to descend remotely from a single source, a hypothetical mother tongue spoken by a hypothetical people which we term Aryan, or more correctly, Indo-European. All the various Latin, Greek, Slavic, Teutonic, and Celtic languages are Aryan, as well as Persian and other Asiatic dialects derived from the ancient Zend, and the numerous Indian languages which trace their origin to Sanskrit. Not very long ago, it was supposed that this common descent of language involved a common descent of blood. End quote, Charles Squire, Celtic Myth and Legend. Quote, the most ancient seat of civilization was in the north. The cradle of the Aryan race was that scattered group of islands which bear the name of Shetlands. End quote, Commons Beaumont, The Riddle of Prehistoric Britain. I might add at this juncture that the ubiquitous theories on the Aryan race purveyed by writers from the late 19th century onwards that subsequently influenced Nazi ideology have little to do with the Arya spoken of here. The obscurantist writings and theories on race by men such as Comte de Gobineau, Guido von List, Jörg Lanz, Thomas Huxley, Houston Stewart Chamberlain, Karl Haushofer, and other British and secret society-funded propagandists has not blinded us to the truth regarding the original Arya. I am only too well aware of the Freemasonic, Atonist origins and tendencies of the German Order, List Society, Order of the New Templars, Thule Society, Armannenschaft, Edda Society, Sclerafia Lodge, German Workers' Party, Nazi Party, and other allegedly pro-Aryan, anti-Semitic organizations that succeeded, through their elaborate machinations, dissemination of pseudo-historical theories, and campaigns of mass indoctrination, in bringing ruin to Germany, Austria, and their neighboring countries. This is not to say that the French and German Ariosophists were not aware of the facts presented here. One must first know a truth and be conversant with the facts before one can expertly distort and skew perspectives concerning it. In some of the grandiose, exaggerated writings of the leading Arya sophists, we get a glimpse of the truth behind the tissue of lies and disinformation. And here are the aforementioned Arya sophists with all their names and dates. These were a few of the main propagandists and obscurantists whose spurious and incendiary writings on race, Anglo-Saxons, Teutons, Darwinism, theosophy, neo-paganism, geopolitics, theozoology, genetics, eugenics, and racial hygiene succeeded in blackening the term Aryan. Like Adolf Hitler, Heinrich Himmler, Karl Haushofer, and most of the Nazi hierarchy, these men were for the most part agents of British intelligence. Another half-mad guru whose teachings played a central role in Nazi ideology was Viennese occultist Karl Maria Will Ligut. He was hired by Himmler, and in the earlier 1930s he established an occult society known suggestively as the New Order of Templars. Quote, "If we are children of the Sunday, children of the sun, children kinder of the R, eagle, sun, announcers, kunder of the R, people knowledgeable, Konner in modern German, of the R, arcaner, persons knowledgeable in the arcana. Arcana is arcane wisdom, or if we strive to become all of the above." End quote. Rudolf John Gorselbin, expert on runosophy and founder of the Edda Society, in his Zenith of Humanity. This is not the place to examine the labyrinthine highways and byways regarding racialism, or the question of whether one race is superior or inferior to another. I confine myself to a singular point and adamantly proclaim an Aryan to be a member of any race. Honor can be found in men from any race or tribe, and so can spiritual mastery. The Aryan who is spiritually and technically advanced automatically benefits and civilizes the world he inhabits. No amount of ordinary men can achieve what he achieves. Furthermore, an Aryan can be Jew or Gentile, Saxon or Hindu, Celt or Egyptian, Oriental or Nordic, Maya or Maori. Originally, Aryans were the technically and spiritually endowed seers, sages, or elders of Atlantis, Lemuria, and other lost civilizations that flourished and then fell over 10,000 years ago. In this sense, the word Aryan is interchangeable with Druid. Quote, J.W. Arch, in Written Records of the Kimri, says that the Druids, unlike the hereditary priest castes of the Eastern world, owed their sacrosanct character not to blood and race, but to a long-continued course of instruction from which they were supposed to emerge a wiser, more sober, better informed, and a more learned class. End quote. Dudley Wright, Druidism, Ancient Faith of Ireland. Quote, the title Arya, Englished into Aryan, literally means in both the Indian Sanskrit, the old classic language of India, and in the ancient Persian language, the exalted or noble one. And it is derived, as I have shown, from the Sumerian Ara, exalt, lofty, shining, glory, which is also disclosed as the remote Sumerian root of our modern word aristocrat, or noblest or most excellent governor. End quote. L.A. Waddell, Makers of Civilization and Race and History, 1929. Quote, it is in aspirated form the Hera, Hiara, or Hor, lord or master of the Goths, Scandinavians, Germans, and Anglo-Saxons, the Aire, Harios, or Hari of the Medes, and the Arya and Arya of the ancient Persians. End quote. Same. Quote, different peoples are often said to have a lower mythology in contrast to the higher mythology of the same people, and it is often the case that the lower mythology had no relation whatever to the higher, and that the lower stratum of people found expression in one mythology and the leading stratum in another. It is thus important to realize when studying the religious history of all Indo-European speaking peoples that the upper stratum represented more closely the traditional ideas of belief. End quote. Professor Han F. K. Gunther, The Religious Attitudes of the Indo-Europeans. Quote, race of itself without the institutions appertaining to it is of trifling importance. Of all institutions, the most long-lived is language. Thus language took almost entirely the place of race in the division of humanity into groups. Or, to put it another way, the word race assumed a different meaning. Language, religion, laws, and customs came to constitute the race far more than blood. End quote. Ernest Renan, History of the People of Israel till the Time of King David, 1894. There's a picture of Hera. Hera was the mother of the Grecian gods, but where did she come from? The letter H was a prefix often used in the same way as French L, signifying the. In this case, Hera is the Era, or Eri. Ares was the son of Hera and Zeus. He was also known as Ari and considered a version of Ptah, architect god of ancient Egypt. His name suggests the Arya. Ares personified the fierce men of northwestern climes. His consort was Eri. Her name, like Hera, was borrowed from the British pantheon. Should we require further clarification on the enigmatic term Aryan, we need look no further than the Hindu Puranas, one of the most ancient collection of texts in the world. In the enormous treatise on Vedic philosophy known as the Bhagavata Purana, or Srimad Bhagavatam, composed by the elders of the Arya during their sojourn in northern India, we learn the precise meaning of the term. Quote, Aryan, a follower of Vedic culture, a person whose goal is spiritual advancement. He truly knows the value of life and has a civilization based on spiritual realization. End quote, Srimad Bhagavatam, glossary. Quote, the word Arya refers to those who are advancing spiritually. The Aryan family is distributed all over the world and is known as Indo-Aryan. In prehistoric days, all of the members of the Aryan family followed the Vedic principles, and therefore they became spiritually advanced. The glorification of the Supreme Lord can be very much appreciated by the Aryan family. Although there is no bar for others, the members of the Aryan family very quickly catch the essence of spiritual life. End quote, Srimad Bhagavatam 4:2026 purport. Quote, an Aryan civilization is a civilization advanced in spiritual knowledge. It's from a different part of the same book. Quote, the difference between the Aryan and non-Aryan, the Sura and the Asura, is in their standards of spiritual advancement. Also from the Srimad Bhagavatam, quote, Aryans do not kill even a small plant unnecessarily, not to speak of cutting trees for sense gratification. Aryans do not distinguish between lower and higher grades of life. All life should be protected. All living beings have a right to live. Aryans do not distinguish between lower and higher grades of life. All life should be protected. All living beings have a right to live, even the trees and plants. This is the basic principle of an Aryan civilization. End quote, Srimad Bhagavatam. Perhaps the first scholar to have disregarded the testimony of the ancient Vedic scriptures such as the Puranas and to misapply the term Aryan was German Orientalist Max Müller. It was apparently from Müller's investigations into comparative religion that readers began taking it into their minds to believe in the rivalry between so-called Aryan and Semitic racial types. The matter became more bizarre after Müller's book Biographies of Words and the Home of the Aryas was published in 1828. In this book, Müller ostensibly distanced himself from the Arya-Sophists. His statement certainly makes it seem that he had insisted on the truth, but found German, French, and English linguists, archaeologists, and anthropologists indifferent to his protestations. Quote, I have declared again and again that if I say Aryas, I mean neither blood nor bones, nor hair nor skull. I mean simply those who speak an Aryan language. To me, an ethnologist who speaks of an Aryan race, Aryan blood, Aryan eyes and hair is as great a sinner. End quote, Max Müller. Quote, the Sanskrit word Aryan refers to one who is righteous and noble. It is also used in the context of addressing a gentleman, Arya Putra, Arya Kanya, etc. According to Müller's etymological explanation, the meaning of Arya is given as excellent, best, followed by respectable, and as a noun, master, lord, worthy, honorable, excellent, upholder of Arya values, and further, teacher, employer, master, father-in-law, friend. End quote, Swami B.V. Giri, The Aryan Invasion. Quote, an inattentive skimming through the Vedas has resulted in a gross misinterpretation of social and racial struggles amongst the ancient Indians. North Aryans were pitted against the southern Dravidians, high castes against low castes, civilized Orthodox Indians against barbaric heterodox tribals. The hypothesis of racial hatred between the Aryans and the dark-skinned Dasyus has no shastric foundation, yet some scholars have misinterpreted texts to try to prove that there was racial hatred amongst the Aryans and Dravidians. End quote, same source. Quote, if the Aryans had invaded and forced the Dravidians down to the south, why is there no Aryan-Dravidian divide in the respective religious literatures and historical traditions? Prior to the British, the North and South lived in peace, and there was a continuous cultural exchange between the two. End quote, same source. Quote, the Aranyaka, holy hermits, sages who dwelt in ancient India in forests, also a portion of the Vedas. End quote, H.P. Blavatsky. The time has come to revise this enigmatic and most important term, Aryan. It need no longer be flagrantly and prejudiciously bandied by anyone wishing to claim exalted racial status. It need no longer be used as an appellation by those deviants brandishing pseudo-scientific ideologies, and by those who have long misunderstood the facts concerning the origin, identity, and fate of the various Indo-European and Semitic races. Importantly, recent discoveries made by Jewish and Gentile investigators alike conclusively prove that the so-called Israelites, those arch-enemies of would-be Aryans, were not racially Semitic after all. Like the Aryans, they too were racially Indo-European. Their language, Hebrew, was identical with Egyptian. Therefore, in our mind, the term Semite must henceforth be dropped as a racial appellation for the Bible's chosen people. As I show in Volume 2, the terms Israelite and Judites do not denote races. The terms were religious and theological and defined cult or caste rather than race. Israelites and Judites were groups closely affiliated with and probably blood related to the Shasu or shepherd kings, that is, the Hyksos nobility of old, a fact confirmed by top Jewish historians. Thanks to the researches of Sigmund Freud, Commons Beaumont, L.A. Waddell, Ahmed Osman, Ralph Ellis, and Mustafa Gadalla, the true identity of the Israelites has finally come out into the open. Obviously, the fact that the alleged ancestors of the Jews were racially Indo-European and of the same racial stock as the antagonist defamed and condemned in the name of spurious racial superiority has poignant ramifications. It assists us to immediately and swiftly restore the grievously abused term Aryan. The term has simply been dragged through the mud by perfidious fools of the same race as the Israelites whom they gullibly believe to be inferior. Now that the hydrochloric acid of reason has been applied, now that the term has been thoroughly excavated from its bed of filth, its unadulterated and original meaning may be discerned. Quote, they were not an ethnic group or a nation as such, but rather a social category with a common lifestyle. End quote, Robert Kornman and J.M. Modrzewski, The Jews of Egypt, from Ramses II to Emperor Hadrian. Not until Jacob in a somewhat obscure manner was told to call himself Israel was that name adopted and accorded to his 12 sons. But if we accept the explanation of Sanchionathan, a Phoenician of Tyre, Cronus, whom Phoenicians called Israel, was king of Phoenicia, and it signified that these Chaldeo-Phoenician tribes were worshippers of Cronus Saturn, for Jehovah was a far later importation. The name Israel has subsequently been misappropriated for those biblical Christians who term themselves Israelites, in fact label themselves followers of a pagan deity. End quote, Commons Beaumont, The Riddle of Prehistoric Britain. The ancient peoples of pre-Diluvian civilizations and of the early historical ones did not distinguish themselves by blood or race. They stood apart from dissimilar types over matters of belief and theology, not nationality, region, or race. One group considered itself similar or dissimilar to another based on the gods and goddesses worshipped and over the luminaries venerated. A man was distinguished by his level of spiritual, not racial purity. What did race matter after the age of catastrophe when both the human race and the fauna suffered incomprehensible decimation, the likes of which boggle scientific minds? Are we really to believe that traumatized survivors of plague, famine, terrestrial upheavals, and ruin were in the habit, after all they had been through, of imagining themselves superior to other unfortunate humans in the same mess? It is ridiculous to believe so, and we would do well to realize the fraudulence of people advocating this idea. What mattered during the aftermath of ruin was that the gods were angry and vengeful, and naturally survival was a prime concern. It would hardly be different today should a universal catastrophe of such proportions ever occur. It was only during later periods of history when men, altered in their consciousness, psychically and emotionally traumatized and hardened due to years of want and loss, began to make racial status something to be inordinately proud of. I maintain that it was of little importance in earlier ages. When we factor in the consequence of the fall of the pre-Diluvian cultures and we contemplate the effects of the age of catastrophe, we get a clearer understanding of the facts concerning the vexatious race question that has compromised and waylaid so many historians and investigators. In short, it was men without spiritual distinction who sought a racial one to take its place. Naturally, it is not commonly known that the various symbols and theological idioms of Judaism and Christianity, and even Brahmanism, are of Druidic origin. This fact is largely unknown even to most antiquarians and historians. It is one of the best kept secrets there is, although it is no secret to high-ranking members of Freemasonry and similar esoteric cabals and fraternities. A close perusal of Masonic writings furnishes us with proof positive that these various symbols, rites, customs, and technical skills existed in the same form in areas and countries: Europe, Persia, Syria, India, Russia, Japan, and China, etc., where neither Jews nor early Christians traveled. They are found in areas conquered and frequented by the Irish Arya, the world's greatest travelers. Quote, in ancient Irish religion and mythology, Tara was the sacred home for the Ari, later the Ari-ish or Irish, who ranked below the Ili gods yet above the people. Ireland, Ariland, takes its name from the Aries, lion, Ilion in Hebrew, or Aryans. Ireland is considered the great motherland of the Aryan race, otherwise known as Atlantis, Thule, or Tula. End quote, William Henry, The Secret Throne of the Illuminati Discovered. Quote, the fact is that Ireland was the first power that colonized along both sides of the Mediterranean Sea, and therefore the colonies came from the west instead of from the east, as our astute Roman and British historians would have us believe. And the world has believed it up to now. Investigators have followed the fast clue sent out from this source and found nothing in the East to support this claim that the Aryans emigrated from the East and colonized toward the West. The real and true evidence points just in the opposite direction. End quote, Connor McDarry. Quote, if the earliest Aryan civilization, as reflected in the Old Testament, the Greek, and other sources, were centered in the north of Europe, and especially in the Scandinavian and British lands, it follows conversely that the present regions from whence our forefathers are believed to have derived their origins, that is to say, in the Middle and Near East, Egypt, and the Mediterranean countries, are credited with a civilization to which they are in no sense entitled, and which they only inherited by migrations from the north. As a matter of fact, anthropology has proved the correctness of this view again and again, showing that the white race never originally entered Europe from Asia. End quote, Commons Beaumont, The Riddle of Prehistoric Britain. And there we see a picture of the Wheel of Life. The symbol of India is the Great Wheel of Life, death and rebirth. Known as the Wheel of Sharasi or Samsara, it is a symbol of reincarnation. But who taught Vedic philosophers this concept? Was it men from the far west who believed in the transmigration of souls? And here's another picture of a guy. The word Arya, meaning noble or high, is mentioned in the inscriptions of Darius the Great and son Xerxes I. It is used both as linguistic and racial designation. Xerxes states in Naksh-i-Rustam, I am Persian, son of a Persian, an Aryan having Aryan lineage. The symbol Dar, as found in Darius, connotes the Druids. It might also be rendered Dari, meaning the Aryan. Xerxes used the title Hari, which also connotes the Arya. Aryan king Babak Khorramdin fought for the preservation of the Iranian civilization. Here's a picture of some ruins in Turkey. Haran in southeastern Turkey was the homeland and commercial center of Hittites and Phoenicians. Biblical lore states that Adam and Eve went to Haran after their expulsion from Eden. Terah, father of Abraham, is also connected with Haran. The moon god Sin was worshipped there. Haran was a cosmopolitan city, and its history reaches back to a very early period. It was overrun by several tribes due to its strategic location. Aridity changed the face of the region, but southern Turkey, Anatolia, was once fertile and flourishing. Scholars allege the name Haran pertains to Aran, brother of Abraham. However, this is spurious. The name pertains to the Arya who frequented Turkey for millennia. Haran was home to many stellar colleges and cults. The moon god Sin was worshipped there. So yeah, basically that's the end of that chapter about the Aryans, showing that Everything we are told in popular culture about what that term means is pretty much a lie. It's totally false, born out of ignorance, and scholars, at a certain level who know the truth, and they are deliberately lying. And of course, there's a whole, legion of scholars beneath them who don't know anything and are just ignorantly parroting things, right? But, Michael TSARION definitely, just sorts all this out. And you can see that in Iran, in the East, in the Near East and the Far East, you have these Druidic elements that spread across the world. And this is the true Arya, and it did not connote race. It was a spiritual caste, or at least that's what Michael's claiming, and I think he makes a great point. And I think it's very important in our message here and now today that this is not about the white race per se. This is about the spiritual advancement of the human species, and that is what we're seeking to achieve. That is what we're working toward, and that is the goal of bringing truth like this to light, is so that we can raise the spiritual vibration of the people so that they can build a paradise on earth the way it used to be before the cataclysm. Right? We are the children of the garden, but now it's time to become the parents of the garden. So that's my video today. Hope you all are having a great time, and we'll be continuing with this shortly. And see you guys next time. Cheers.